Welcome back to the Within podcast. This is your host, Nikki Wallace, with co-host Payne. Today, we're excited to talk through kind of what we do within the People Co., kind of how we do it, and who we serve. So, Allie, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So at the People Co., there are four major buckets, I would say, that we really spend our time. One of them is fractional HR, recruiting, employee experience, and of course the last one, which might be the most exciting right now, is the potential within and all things summit related. So we're going to spend some time talking about what and then how. And how we do it is really we serve, we educate, and we connect. We're going to give you some examples of each of those pillars and then how it would look like if you were interested in potentially partnering with the People Co. So, Nikki, why don't you talk about the fractional HR work that you've been doing with some of your clients?
Yeah. So with fractional HR, I know fractional is kind of a buzzword right now, but really all that is we go in and work as the HR person. So I work with a lot of companies that don't have HR, or maybe they, somebody's going out on a leave, or they have a big project that they're doing. So fractional HR just really is what's kind of missing from your people strategy standpoint, and where can I step in and help. So typically a lot of the clients right now, they didn't even have an HR person. So they're a growing company, or they're getting to the point where the owner or operator is probably doing most of the HR work. They don't necessarily have the background, and they don't have the bandwidth anymore to kind of deal with, for lack of a better word, the people strategy. So as soon as you start adding people, there's a lot that happens in an organization. So once you get to the point where you feel like you need more of that support, a fractional person for a small company is a great option. So we pick kind of amount of hours that we come in and work alongside with you. And we really build your people strategy alongside your business strategy. So, one of the companies.
Is there like a point in time that a CEO or an owner should start thinking
Yeah.
about potentially either hiring their own HR or looking at the fractional in the fractional space? What's that look like for an employer?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's probably a little different for every company, but I would say once you hit probably the 10-ish employees, 10 to 15 employees, it's just a lot to manage. It's a lot to manage policies and PTO schedules, and everybody that works for you has life outside of you, right? So if you get to the point where you don't really have the bandwidth to do all of that, plus your everyday operating or owning the company, that's probably when the fractional HR person is really key to your business.
And is it 2 hours a week? Is it 20 hours a week? Is it 50 hours? What's the time, what's the time both from what you provide at the People Co., but also what is it that they, how much time will they spend, on HR once you start working with them?
Yeah, hopefully not as much as they were. At first, it's a transition, right? So I don't know everything about all of your people and your organization at first. So I think ideally it would be nice if you could just dump a bunch of papers on a desk and let me go. And I sometimes that does happen, but it's nice when there's a transition period. I usually have the first month or two where we are weekly meetings, so we try to do just like an hour meeting, so it's not taking up all of your week or all of your time, and slowly transition kind of some of that knowledge. And once I'm up and running, my hope would really be that there's going to be questions and things that I can't answer that you're going to work with me on, but maybe an hour or two a week, but it should be a lot less than what you were doing. So from hours that I would work with your company, it kind of depends how big the company is and the complexity. So if you're all in one spot and it's one location, there's under 15 or 20 employees, it's probably going to be 10-ish hours a week, 5 to 10 hours, depending again to, am I doing everything? So am I doing all of your recruiting, all of your payroll, all of your benefits administration, which is likely, that's the normal scenario that I come in and kind of help with all of that, or partner with people kind of in the spaces that are doing all of that. Or, am I just doing one real specific? So some companies, I actually come in, and I'll talk about this later, and I just do recruiting. And so you can kind of split it up depending on what your needs are, or if you are growing, what that looks like. But generally it's anywhere between 10 and 20 hours a week.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, that's a really great segue into the next pillar, which is
Yeah.
recruiting. I think recruiting, Nikki got her start really in the corporate world, in the recruiting space. And that's how I met Nikki when I met her, back in the day, or a year, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And one of the really fun things about the recruiting space is that Nikki knows it really well. We have lots of friends in the space that are recruiters, and so recruiting has been another area that Nikki spends a lot of time in. So talk a little bit about the recruiting that the People Co does.
Yeah. And this is really how I got my start. So May of 21, when I started, this is kind of all I did was outsourced recruitment. So it's called RPO, or recruitment process outsourcing. It's a big term that you don't really need to know, but there's kind of a whole world out there that I didn't even know after 9 years of recruiting even existed. So the fractional recruiter, kind of the same as the HR, you come in and you do just the recruitment for that company. So from a candidate experience, I'm really big on the candidate experience. They're not going to know I'm an outside agency unless they really go digging. I'm using the tools that are within the system, or that the company already has. Hopefully they have them. If not, we'll work on getting you at least a simple ATS or something that's going to be able to, help the recruitment process. But then we're really from there, I take on either all or part of the recruiting of the company. So a lot of times, people that will work with me in this space, they have a lot to hire. The first company I ever worked with, in 9 months, I actually hired 162 people. So I was in charge of they were moving their headquarters to Des Moines, and I was in charge of operations, sales, and marketing, and really getting that built up in the Des Moines market. So in that situation, the team didn't have the headcount to be able to add a recruiter to their team. They already had a team, but they just also needed the support. The team that they had did not have the bandwidth to hire that many people. So it can be something like that for a bigger company that I've done, or it could be, again, trying to scale, trying to grow, and just don't have the bandwidth. So I think a lot of people think recruiting is to simply, like, I'm going to put up a post and I'm going to, filter the applicants, and I think the market has changed. So there is some of that you're able to do that as an organization, but the recruiting is the first step in somebody engaging with your company. And if you're just throwing out a post and hoping that, Friday at 4 o'clock before you go to happy hour, you're going to have time to sift through all of these resumes and, set up interviews for the next week. Like, just think about the candidate experience. And that's, like, the companies I work with, they really care about what that candidate experience is from the start of the job description, and kind of what that looks like getting that candidate into the company as an employee. So some of the smaller companies that I've worked with, they wanted to grow. They knew they didn't have the skills or the bandwidth. I also bring a lot of tools with me. Some of the companies I work with, when I first sit down with them, they're, oh, I'm spending $5,000 a month, or even $2,000 a month on Indeed. And it literally makes me want to gag.
That's like one of my favorite stats that you share, is when these companies are spending so much money on Indeed and they're getting, very few candidates that are even quality candidates for their,
especially
for their open.
Right. Especially if you're a small company, like, to be able to get views and this is a whole other podcast we could probably do. You have to spend a lot of money on Indeed. So will you get resumes? Yes. Will you get the best resumes? Probably not. So if you are spending money on Indeed, stop and call somebody that can support you with the recruitment. You're going to save, in the long run, you will save a lot of time and energy. So
yeah, I know. I love that one. That's always one. Another pillar inside the People Co is employee experience. And that's really my wheelhouse. So that's where I spend a lot of my time. We have a great group of consultants that also dabble in the employee experience space. But that's really everything from an employer's culture to their well-being to their, what are they doing to drive engagement inside their organization. And that can encompass a lot of different things. It could also be like training. We could do sexual harassment training, things that you have to do from an employer standpoint, or it could be leadership development. So really thinking about that broad scope of what does that employee experience look like. Nikki talked a little bit about recruiting, and that how does a potential employee feel during the recruiting process. We want that to live on during the entire life cycle of the employee. So whether it's during recruiting or it's when they're actually onboarding or once they're there, how are you engaging them to make sure that they're living and thriving the best possible way that they can? So I think that's really important for the work that we do at the People Co. And it could be everything from doing a simple engagement survey, or it could be doing, listening sessions, or man, you have a whole bunch of people on a team and their job descriptions like haven't been updated in 25 years, and are they really in the right roles? And as you're hiring younger talent, how are the older generations inside your workforce managing the younger talent, or how are the younger talent managing the older relationships? So that generational, all the things that are happening within the generations inside your workforce are really important nuggets that you need to think about as a leader or as a business owner. And so we spend a lot of time doing that. And all of it is through that serve, educate, and connect lens. So we're constantly trying to figure out, how do we make sure that you're getting what you need to make sure your business strategy is connected to your people strategy. We keep finding over and over and over again, it doesn't matter how large or how small the organization is, they're just not, those two things are not talking to each other. And our job is to make sure that they're talking to each other. We also have done mentorship programs. So, all of those things, those pieces that really make your people want to stay and want to grow inside your organization is where the employee experience kind of bucket falls. It's a big bucket. It's probably less, specific, because every single employer needs and wants something different, and your people need and want something different. And so we start with your people, identifying what do your people need and want, versus saying, hey, like add more benefits or add more resources. We don't want to tell you to spend more money if you don't need to. Let's figure out, what are you doing today? How are you communicating it? And is it what your people really need and want? And that changes, right? That could change every year depending on who you're hiring and who you're firing. It just totally depends. So it's just important.
I'm going to put the question back on you. What is the normal kind of persona, or what are companies coming to you for? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think right now they're trying to understand what their people need and want, right? So whether it's identifying the resources they already have, so doing some sort of resource assessment, resource audit of all the things that you offer as an employer. And we look at it through the well-being lens. So we just break it down into those 5 essentials of well-being from Gallup. That's how we start. And we say, okay, everything in the physical well-being. And that's your traditional like wellness. Like when you think of wellness, we think of physical well-being, like what do you have for nutrition? What do you have for, do you have a technology, a wellness technology platform? Like we start there. And then we look at the other essentials of well-being. So whether it's community or social, emotional, or physical or career, what are all of the things that you offer today? And then we go to employees and we say, hey, do you know about all these resources? Right. And let me tell you,
they don't.
People might know 1 or 2. I was working with a client a couple of years ago, and they had like 75 resources. And I went to employees and I said, okay, can you tell me, name 5 resources? And most people could, tell me 2. And it was the 2 that were most important to them at that time in their life, right? So if you're a new mom, the most important things are going to be things like, do I have a resource to help me with daycare? Do I have, what's my maternity leave strategy look like as an employer? So it's like making sure that and your employees know what you have under the hood of all the things that you're paying for. The other crazy thing is a lot of employers, like when we get in there and we start asking questions about what the resources, what are the resources you have, 9 times out of 10, they don't even know their own resources, right? So they have all these vendors that they work with and they have no idea what resources they have. It's crazy to me how many times we uncover, oh, by the way, you have 4 EAPs you're paying for. Oh my goodness, employee assistance programs. Like that's a great resource for an employee, but if you don't even know you have 4 of them, your employees definitely don't know you have 4 of them. Why do you have 4 of them? So we help them uncover kind of all the things that they have, and then how are they communicating it and getting it out to their employees when they need it. And that's the most important thing is everyone says like, oh, we communicate it. Well, do you communicate it in a way that your employees can actually like understand it? And it's usually like they only hear it when they need it. So you've got to figure out ways to communicate it differently and at different times. And are there places that you can have it so an employee would know, okay, I'm having this situation, I'm going through a divorce. What do I do? Where do I find out my resources for, going through a divorce? And that's really hard. Most people aren't going to go to their leaders and say, hey, I'm going through a divorce. Right. Like, do you know any resources? No, you're going to have to put it somewhere where they're going to be able to go out and find it.
Yeah.
So that's like super level, like, and that doesn't even take very much time, right? It doesn't take any time from your HR team. Like, we're doing a lot of the work there. We're digging through all your stuff, your intranets, all those things. So you're not asking your HR team, if you have one, or Nikki, if Nikki's your HR team, we're not asking them to do a lot of work. We're really coming in and doing a lot of the work.
Yeah. Do you want to touch on some of the trainings or speaking engagements that you've done, or kind of what that would look like?
Yeah, so the other, bucket inside the employee experience that I talked a little bit about, which is, speaking engagement. So education is so key, particularly now in the environment that we're in, whether it's virtual or in person, getting your employees educated in all of your things. And we like to start with generations. Generations inside the workforce is a huge topic. By 2027, 75% of your workforce will be millennial or younger. The crazy thing is millennials are not young. We keep thinking, oh, millennials are young. And no, yeah, like your oldest millennial is 44 this year. So
we're young.
You're, come on. Yeah, no, you are, totally are, but you're not young and inexperienced, right? You're young and experienced. So I think it's just important that you understand, like, we can help you with some of that education. And the more education you do for your people, and again, it doesn't have to necessarily be in person. It could be virtual, or it could be a recorded training that you do for all of your people. And it doesn't have to be big. So we do customized training. So it doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be an hour. It could be 15 minutes. But we can create a training program that starts and finishes. You could do 6 months of training, and it could be 15 minutes every other week or something. Right. I think one of the things that I keep hearing is, I've got a friend who does, their organization has hired a really great sales training that they think is really great. The problem that their team is having is they meet once a month. Yeah. And then they're like, okay, I did a sales training on Monday, and now a month from now, I've got to remember and I've got to practice all that stuff. And they don't have any tools between that 4 weeks to make sure that they're actually practicing some of those sales techniques that they're learning. Wow. So we can fill that gap in the middle, or choose a program that's more effective around, like touch points during that off time, if you will. Those are great programs, but they aren't great if you're not doing anything with them. Right. in the middle. And I think they call that the messy middle, right? Like the things that are happening in the middle that aren't really happening, and you hope that they are.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah. And then the last thing that we want to talk about, and we're not going to spend a ton of time on it because we'll do a whole nother podcast on the potential within, but the potential within is a pillar inside the People Co. that we're super proud of. I have gotten to ride Nikki's tailcoats around the potential within, but when she first came to me and started talking about the potential within, I was like, this woman is whacked. Like, crazy. There is no possible way. Yeah, there's no way that this is not going to happen. And at the time, she was really thinking about it from a corporate standpoint. Like, how do we get corporations to get their people there? And that was where I was like, I don't know, like, that's going to be really hard. And it was. But when we flipped the switch to, let's just go direct to employees. Mm-hmm. Let's forget the, like, trying to go through the company and get the company on board. Let's just do that. And when we started doing that, that's where the magic really mm-hmm. happened. Was people are craving this whole idea of, what do I do outside of my regular, like, healthcare? Mm-hmm. I've got to do something different. And this isn't about, like, insurance and all of that garbage. We're not talking about that. We're talking about, like, menopause and supplements and ADHD and, all the stuff that, like, you've always probably wondered about. Mm-hmm. I know I always have, but I didn't really know until my friend Heidi Butoff, who, will show up here shortly, until she said, Allie, you should really go see a functional medicine person. Like, they might be able to tell you, why you've gained 5 pounds and you can't figure out how to get it. And you've changed nothing about your diet or your exercise routine or nothing. Like, let's get you in to talk to a functional medicine. And that's the whole point of the potential within is, how do we start talking about the things that aren't? So Nikki, tell your story, which is a great story about how the potential within kind of came to fruition. And then we'll wrap this one up and we'll talk about the potential within again. And I'm sure another podcast here shortly.
Yeah. And it only took a year and a half of me talking about it for it to happen. And well, I guess it happened in November. So a couple months ago, but kind of cliff notes of how it came to be. And then, again, we'll talk about it later because there's a lot here. And I think as we've done the event and had people come to us, it is something that people, they want more of. And frankly, in my eyes, they need more of, right? So how I had this whole medical journey after having my second daughter and starting to scale my company on my maternity leave. Um, and
That's what you always do. You do it when, there's not enough time in the day. That's when you do
yeah,
it.
I had all this time off, so I might as well just grow a company. Um,
Right?
but I always say this company is going to be Nora's someday because she went to all the accounting meetings and banking meetings and everything to move this company where it is. But anyway, I had kind of a big event happen and then it spiraled into this. Wow, this like isn't a one-time thing. This is something that's changing my life. I was in a ton of chronic pain. I had a lot of really messy and embarrassing symptoms going on, and I kind of was shifted from doctor to doctor. And after a year and a half of 10 specialists, like I had 5 or 7 procedures. They thought I had cancer at one time. I mean, my husband and I literally thought we were going to be like, making a will and saying our goodbyes. That when we think about that summer that happened, it was such a scary time. And as all of this was happening, I was also, like I said, scaling my company, and I did a program, the Goldman Sachs 10K Small Business, and I was sitting in a room of entrepreneurs, and this woman had a baby and also hadn't taken a maternity leave, and you could kind of tell that she maybe like needed a maternity leave. And there's I work with the executives too, where it's like you're coming into these organizations and they're stressed out, and there's all of these things that are human, the human side of what's going on in an organization, and we're not really paying attention to it. But yet like we're
Right.
expecting these people to come into the office, and I was one of those people, right? That I was coming into this office putting a smile on my face for my team that was new and had no idea what the hell was going on. And we were making it happen, and I just kept thinking to myself, like, there has to be something different. Like the just because the clock ticks 8 a.m. doesn't mean that all of the symptoms go away, or my child just magically walks into daycare or to school and doesn't have their ADHD situation going on that we're trying to accommodate, or whatever the case is. And I was like, how do we start, like, I the universe, God, whatever you believe in, gave me the platform I have today, and I think I need to do something different. So that's kind of like a high level how my mind kind of was like, we need to just do something. But how do we, to Allie's point, like there's people aren't talking about this, like even though it's going on and everybody that walks into your organization is having a life at home that probably involves
Yeah.
some sort of health journey, whether it's them, whether it's someone in their family. And how do we start doing this? So we chose the potential within as our avenue, and throwing a day event where we're bringing these resources. So really, to me, the event was threefold: education, resources, and community. So education, like I didn't know, and I would consider, I've always struggled with my weight, but I've always been very intrigued by the wellness kind of side of life. Like the body is very intriguing to me, and what happens and why it happened. So I I felt really passionate about, like, I didn't even know some of the things that I learned on my journey. So I can't imagine the people that don't advocate for themselves, or like don't know how or don't know where to turn. So how do we get education in these people's hands? Like, let's just talk about like hormones. Like I didn't even know. I turned to social media and TikTok, frankly, for the stuff that I had going on, because I didn't have anybody to talk to, right? Like I didn't have anybody that had openly talked to me. Now that I've told my story, I have people all the time coming and talking to me about their situations.
Cool.
But again, like, so that goes in the community piece, like how it was such a dark, frankly, and lonely time. I had something very scary going on, but on the outside, I had this company and we were scaling, and I had all these employees, and we had all of these things going on. So again, I kind of am the prime example of like, I shut it off, or tried to shut it off when I walked in the door, and I went and did my day. So how do you create community so that the people like me, like everybody that has a chronic or anything going on, like they have somewhere to go. They have somewhere to go to ask a question or just talk. Like, hey, you might not have the same thing going on, but holy shit, this is scary. Like, what do I do? Who can I talk to? And then the resources part of it. So we had 17 vendors and sponsors there the day of. We had a reset room, is what I was lost sleep over the reset room because I didn't really know how it was going to go. But
It went great. It
it
went
was
great.
awesome. It was so fun. And you were really able to throughout the day step away and immerse yourself in some of the functional modalities. So how do you turn health into, like, there's going to always be something that needs to happen, but how do we also do things that help us along the way? So the proactive versus the reactive, kind of, that's where the wellness side comes in. So they were able to go to the reset room, and then the vendors, we had a bunch of vendors that just they could go talk to the practitioners, and really see, like, in that room, who are the people in our community that I could turn to. And it's been so fun to see all of the connections that have been made since then. I'm learning every day when I talk to people, oh, now I'm going to, Dr. Tammy, or I'm on this supplement or whatever, because I just didn't even know about it and I'm feeling so much better. So long story, or a long answer. But I'm very proud, and my 70-year-old dad was in the room the day of the event. This is kind of a funny story, and then I'll stop talking. But my parents, so they're both 70, they live 5 hours away. So I kept talking to them. They knew I was having this event. Obviously, they had been on trips to Mayo with me, so like they very much knew my story. They were in my inner circle kind of when all that was going on. But truth be told, they didn't tell me this, but I could tell by their body language that they were thinking they were going to come and listen to me speak and tell my story, and they were going to get the hell out, right? They were like, I don't know what this is all about. Like, I just, and you guys, they stayed until like the very last minute when they had to leave. And my dad, I'm like getting chills talking about this, but my dad just, like, to this day, like, has raved about that. Like, I've been married to your mom for 50 years and I didn't even know that that was what was happening in her body, because we had a hormone speaker. And so anyway.
Well, and you have he has 3 daughters.
Yeah, and a son.
Right? Like, he's there, 3 girls. He lived with all women.
Yes. And he's the most patient man in the world. But yeah, so I mean, I think it just went to show, and we've talked about that afterwards, like, how do we kind of integrate, because we kept getting asked, like, who is this event for? And we struggled, like, is it for men? Is it for women? And I was like, it's for everybody and anybody that's open to it. I think, we need our people to be well so that everything can happen, right? Like, if we have sick people and sick people in our communities, like, that's going to correlate into business and all the things. So
Totally.
we look forward to seeing you next week.